channel. Today we will be seeing laws of motion part 2. In this video we will be discussing only about collisions, type of collisions, what is collisions. So let's get started with the video. What is collision? When two moving bodies interact and experience a sudden impact force during their motion, then this event is known as a collision. During the impact, both bodies exert a certain amount of force on each other. This force is known as collision force. Due to the collision, both the bodies change their momentum and energy. In the collision, the determination of velocities can be done with the help of the law of conservation of momentum and the law of conservation of energy. A collision between two bodies can occur by making actual physical contact, and sometimes they do not make any physical contact with each other, but a collision occurs. A collision can be perfectly elastic, inelastic, and freely inelastic. In this video, an attempt has been made for giving brief information like defining collision, defining elastic and inelastic collision, what causes a collision, collision force, types of collision, line of impact in a collision. When the collision happens between the two bodies, they interact with each other with a sudden impact force for a shorter duration of time. The major causes due to which collision occurred between two bodies are given below. For the collision to happen, the line of the impact of these colliding bodies must be collinear or intersect with each other. The line of impact is the line that passes through the center of the colliding bodies. If the two moving bodies have a common line of impact or intersecting line of impact, then the collision will occur. When the line of impact is common between the moving bodies and if the velocity of the first body is greater than the second body, then there will be chances of collision and it might be another cause of the collision. The types of collision are differentiated on the basis of conservation of energy principle and the direction of colliding bodies before the collision. The type of collisions are categorized under two categories. 1. Based on the conservation of energy principle. In this section, the types of collisions are differentiated based on the law of conservation of energy and conservation of momentum during the collision. There are three types of collisions that are shown: perfectly elastic collision, inelastic collision, perfectly inelastic collision. Based on the direction of colliding bodies. In this section, the types of collisions depend upon the direction of the colliding bodies before the collision takes place. Based upon that, the collision is of two types: one-dimensional collision, or also known as head-on collision, oblique collision. In an elastic collision, when a collision takes place between two bodies, then the kinetic energy of two bodies will remain the same. A perfectly elastic collision is an ideal case of elastic collision. For perfectly elastic collision, the value of the coefficient of restitution is 1. An example of perfectly elastic collision is the bounce back tendency of the wall when it hits the floor. Elastic collision. In a perfectly elastic collision, when two bodies collide with each other, then there is no change occurring in the total kinetic energy of the system. It means that there is not any transformation of energy occurring in the form of heat, noise, etc. It is a special case of elastic collision. The collision formula perfectly elastic collision is shown in the figure. The first body of mass m with velocity u1 strikes the second body of mass m2 moving with velocity u2. After the collision, the first body moves with v1 and the second body moves with v2. As the total momentum is conserved, then the initial momentum of both the body P1 plus P2 will be equal to the final momentum of both the bodies P1 naught plus P2 naught. Inelastic collision. In an inelastic collision, when two bodies collide with each other, then there will be some loss in the kinetic energy of the body. In this case, the body gets stuck to each other, which indicates that one of the bodies has lost its kinetic energy. An inelastic collision is a type of collision in which the kinetic energy is not reserved, but the momentum remains conserved. In the given case, the value of the coefficient of the restitution lies between 0 to 1. An example of inelastic collision is dropping a ball of clay on the floor. A perfectly inelastic collision is a special type of case of inelastic collision. In this type of collision, when two bodies collide with each other, then both of the bodies get stick to, get stick together and move further as a single body. In this case, a large change in kinetic energy is recorded. The value of the coefficient of restitution is 0. The collision formula will be same as the inelastic collision. Example of perfectly inelastic collision is dropping a ball of clay on the floor. Head-on collision, or is also known as one-dimensional collision, is the case of elastic collision when two bodies moving along the same path and the velocity of the first body is greater than the second body collides with each other, and after the collision they move in different velocities. The path of both moving bodies is the same as they move along the straight line joining their center bodies. In this collision, the first body strikes the second one and has a head-on collision with the second body. In this encounter, the total kinetic energy of both bodies after the collision will be equal to the kinetic energy of the bodies before the collision, which confirms that there is no conservation of kinetic energy into other forms. An example of a head-on collision is when a car strikes an stationary objects like a tree. Oblique collision is a type of collision where the first body strikes the other one at an angle before the collision and after the collision. Both of the bodies move with different velocities. In the collision, the line joining the center of both moving bodies is not the same, and their respective line along the center of the body intersect with each other at an angle. It also belongs to an inelastic collision. If both bodies remain in the same plane before and after the collision, then it will be a 2 or 3 dimensional collision. The bodies are moving in the x direction initially, so the initial momentum of the bodies in y direction will be 0. The momentum will be conserved in both the x and y directions. The conservation of momentum in the x direction will give. So, that's all for today. Today in this video we have discussed types of collisions, what is collisions, types of collisions, and we have discussed the different types of collisions like elastic, inelastic, one-dimensional collision, or also known as head-on collision, oblique collision. In the next video we would be discussing the further part of the chapter. So this is the part 2 of the chapter laws of motion. So in the next part we would continue with the chapter. That's all for this video. Thank you all.